Hi, everyone. Welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. I'm Langdon DeMint.
And I'm Julian Taylor.
And welcome to our podcast. Welcome back to the Two Bald Guys podcast, everyone. I'm Langdon DeMint, here with my dear friend, Jules. How's it going, buddy?
It's all good. It's all good, Langdon. It feels rather strange to just have two bald guys on the podcast this week, but we'll do our best. Yeah, no.
Sometimes
bald,
two bald guys are,
no bald guest this week.
No bald guest. How's life?
Life is good. So a nice long holiday. Well, not long holiday. Nice long weekend. So it was the school holidays over here. So I took some time and
nice.
Yeah, just relaxed a bit, which was good.
That's always good.
Yep.
Here is our holiday weekend as well. I mean, I know the recording can come out later, but on President's Day, and we had family come up this weekend. So my niece came to help watch while my wife was gone, actually, the girls. So we were likewise one of those busy weekends, but very fun. But it's getting warm here, so I need some golf. That's what I need.
I think, yeah, well, it's still cold here, so, and windy, and so British golf weather, I would say.
That's proper
golf weather. Yeah.
Well, how are things work-wise? You been going around lately, done anything?
Had a great time last week. Went across to before I took a couple of days off. Went across to Manchester, which is in the north of England, and went to a safety show, which was great. It's good to catch up with a few people that I've sort of worked with in the past. So that was a really good day. Talked on a panel, which was interesting. Met some really interesting people there, and had a good talk about the future of safety. So I think there's a future podcast there for us around the future of safety. So if everyone wants to just keep an eye on what we're doing, that hopefully will be one that we managed to get recorded in the next couple of months or so.
I feel like for those of you that have listened routinely, and hopefully that's many of you, and you tell your friends, there actually is planning that goes on. We have
really doesn't feel like it at times, but yeah.
Back in the old days, like I think about even in the very, very first start, Paul and myself, it was really the Wild West of our podcasting.
Yeah.
And then Jules came along, and it has really gotten a lot more focused. There's a lot of people behind the scenes I'm not going to we have to give the credit to, but it is really, we are planning regularly now.
Yep.
And that's I think that's strong.
I can't take the kudos for that. I think actually we should call out on the pod for a change. Actually, James, who sits behind the scenes and records these things, and make sure that we're sitting in the right place and we've got the levels right. But actually, Marissa is our sort of pod organizer, and she does a great job of not just organizing us, but bringing in guests when we're having guests on the pod as well. So, because I think myself and you could never be accused of being too organized, could we?
She truly is the wind beneath our wings, so to speak, in certain circumstances. I mean, it's not like a plane that crashes. It's one of those. It comes back up whenever it's low. So yeah, we do. So we do have cadence. We do have plans. So as we kind of think about it, and we try to tie everything together, I think that's what's fun from everything we've done. And we've talked about, incident management recently. We've talked about failing safely. We've hit on different aspects of incidents. We've had some guests that how can you continuously improve in certain areas like that. And what we've talked about for this one was a little more out of the blue, I guess. But that's the good thing about it. What did you see? You wanna jump in? This one was a little out of the blue because it was an occurrence of what Joel saw. He was basically hunting hazards, but not meaning to hunt hazards and incidents.
Yeah, there is meaning in that madness that Langdon's talking about in terms of hunting hazards, and if you keep your eyes on LinkedIn, you will see that. And I think in the next couple of weeks. it was actually, how do I describe it, Langdon? It was a bit of a sort of check, really, in terms of actually why do we have these conversations? Why do we do this podcast? And to set the scene, we have an office in Manchester. Next to that office in Manchester, there's a really large construction site. And I was over in Manchester a couple of weeks ago, and I'm coming out of the office, and the office, there's an underground car park. So I'm pretty good at bagging a space in the underground car park so that I don't have to use public transport to get there. I can just drive in, drive out. But it's a really tight sort of access and egress into that car park. So it's literally one car wide to get in or out. And as you come out now, there's as soon as you come out, there's hoardings immediately in front of you where the building site is. So you turn right out of the garage, and then there's a left turn onto a one-way street. So you can only go one way down it, and it's only wide enough for one vehicle. So I came around the corner onto the one-way street, and there's a truck there, Langdon. Truck. Do you notice I used the American word there?
Big truck.
Yeah,
Big
big
truck.
truck.
Probably everyone that means probably is like a box truck or to a carrier, something like that. Not a ram or
Well,
anything like
well,
that.
we would call a lorry. Yeah,
A lorry.
a
So that's a big
lorry,
truck. Big
a
truck. Big
big,
rig.
big truck. Um,
Big rig.
and it had so it's sitting there with with the back open, and the I don't know what you call them. We call them hazard flashes. You know, when the indicators are flashing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a guy on the back of it, and he's an oldish guy. I don't want to call him out in terms. I don't want to do him any disservice here, but he looks oldish to me. And he's got a motorized pallet truck, and he's going to take a pallet of material off the back of this truck. So he's wheels it onto a tail lift, goes down on the tail lift, and then he's trying to wheel this pallet of goods onto a building site. Now, you can imagine what's the ground like on most construction sites. It's pretty uneven, not easy to wheel a pallet truck on. So he's struggling to get this pallet of goods onto the site, but he does it. He gets it just inside the sort of security fencing, and there's a guy there who's sort of receiving these goods. So he pulls the pallet truck out from underneath the pallet and shoves it behind himself. And then he goes back to this guy, turns around to him again to sign for the goods that he's just received. So you think, fine. I'm sat there waiting patiently, as you do. And you know I'm a patient man, Langdon. Yeah. And the next thing, he takes a step backwards. He trips over his pallet truck. He falls over. And it's pretty obvious as soon as he stands up that he's broken his arm or broken his wrist. You can see that it's not really in a very natural position. So it's the most innocuous of settings and the most innocuous of sort of scenes. And he's had what I would call a pretty serious incident. And he goes to sit on the back of his truck. And the next thing is he's fainted and he's on the floor on the tail lift of the truck. So this is getting worse by the minute. And at this point, my wife said to me, "Well, what did you do?" and yeah, and shamefully, I said, "Well, I didn't do anything."
I think I asked you the same thing.
I think you asked me the same question, and you did lay the guilt on me. But I suppose what I could say is I'm not health and safety trained. And it was a construction site, and part of the sort of legal requirements in the UK is that you're gonna have some qualified people on there to deal with an incident like this. But it just really struck me that this was such an innocuous situation, and people sort of can sometimes belittle health and safety and say, "Why do we do it?" And it's for exactly this kind of reason that we try to get people to think about what it is that they're doing and the hazards that are all around them, even in that most innocuous of settings. But then it kind of got me thinking. Obviously, you sit there and witness something like that, and it kind of has an effect on you. And it just got lots of things going through my head like then in terms of, okay, so what happens next? So as a business, if that's your driver and your truck, okay, what happens next? You've got a truck probably half full of deliveries that's sitting there now with no driver. You've got a driver who's going to be off sick probably for a period of time and unable to drive his truck. So it's going to affect him. It's going to directly affect him and his family. Plus, you've then got to get a replacement driver in to sort of carry on and get those jobs done. But the thing I thought was really interesting was sort of pondering around what happens when we've had an incident. So we go and do the investigation, and I suppose it's what happens as a result of that investigation. And and for me, in that situation, part of the result of your investigation might be that you set in place some kind of process when you're delivering onto a site in terms of how you use that piece of equipment, what you do with it once you've actually got the load onto site, and that might be something like, okay, once you've dropped the load, the first thing you do is you put the pallet truck back onto the tail lift or back onto the truck, and then get the paperwork signed, um, which seems fairly logical. You put something simple in place that says we try and avoid this thing happening again. Um, but the thing that I thought was interesting is what happens over time. Because over time, you might create this new risk assessment, new JHA, where you say this is the way that we do things. But then over time, as new people come in and that accident is forgotten, actually people start to maybe circumvent that control because they don't understand why it's there in the first place. Um, and what it does is delays them from being really quick and really efficient in terms of getting their job done, their round of deliveries done. Um, and I was talking to one of our colleagues who used to work for a very large international manufacturer and supplier of gases, without mentioning any names. And I thought one of the really interesting. We were talking about this, and she said that it's really interesting because that particular organisation had an ongoing process of actually revisiting historical incidents. And actually, I thought that was a great idea, Langdon. So revisit historical incidents so that you have that refresh on a regular basis of actually this is why we do things now.
Yeah. Oh, I think, and even, if you get to really large organizations, then can become, I guess, cumbersome. It could, even doing that. It does go back to the point, like what you and I also talked about in regards to this, and thinking a little more bit about it is how often, and let's make the assumption he wasn't going on the way the actual job was to be done. So maybe there wasn't an SOP, maybe there was, and he deviated from it. Um, it even brings up to how often do we review those, and then also if you have a lone worker, how often are we adhering to those even when they exist? Because to your point a second ago, maybe it's not the quickest way or whatever. How often are we cognizant of our surroundings? Are we cognizant of the way the job is supposed to be done? Are we revisiting those SOPs, or if there's a job hazard analysis to understand the surroundings, meaning what is around you that could lead to an incident and such. And those are the things that if you don't do, it's pretty easy for an incident to happen, and it's hopefully usually it's minor, but every once in a while it's something like you're saying now. I mean, in the big picture, I mean, he's alive, but you know what I mean. That's a pretty serious. He's To your point. He's not going to be able to work because he's not going to be able to drive a truck because usually those are at least a manual, so he's probably going to have trouble shifting. So then you have to either figure out job rotation or he's going to be at home, retraining, putting someone else on it. We didn't even talk about what it actually did for that little while to the road itself. So it wasn't a thoroughfare, so people were going to have to be redirected in other ways. So there's a lot of rundown effects that came from that incident, and I think that's pretty common. How can we keep a good process fresh
Yeah,
over time?
yeah, yeah. And I
And that's
mean,
challenging.
and it's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, I was thinking about a couple of other things relating to this because I was talking on a panel last week, and one of the questions we got was around how do you get leadership buy into safety, and actually this is a really good example, isn't it? Where actually safety in this situation saves a whole massive load of hassle and a massive load of cost. Through some really simple things. Yeah. So through simple process, you can avoid the chaos that this would have caused because, like you said, it's blocked a road. They've got to get somebody else out to get the van to go and then complete those deliveries. They've then got to get temporary labour in. They've got to train that temporary labour. So that was one of the things I was thinking about. Is actually it's a really simple example, isn't it, of when an incident happens, the job stops. Yeah. So straight away, that has a repercussion on an organisation, and also then the knock-on effect is to get the job going again. We need to get potentially retrained labour in place. So I thought that was one interesting point. The other interesting point was I was reading an article in a UK safety magazine, and it was talking about the sort of planning that we do when we're working on other people's sites. And this is working on somebody else's site, isn't it? It's delivering to somebody else's site. And it just struck me as really interesting when you look at again at the circumstances. So you've got a really tight, narrow thoroughfare. Yeah. You've got very limited access into the site itself because there was a massive excavation and and there was very little room around the sort of outside of that excavation. Yeah. You've got really uneven ground. Yeah. But I suppose the question I'm asking Langdon is I wonder how much pre planning went into that delivery. Or was it get the goods on the back of the wagon and take them to this location in Manchester? Yeah.
I, I dare say you're right. And then even when you're there, you've got a job to do, you have a certain amount of time, you have to do it. So it's what we've talked about. I'm as safe as I have to be without being too safe in order to still maintain my own health, safety, and productivity. And it gets challenging. And I don't know, something when you were just talking, I kind of came to me. I also wonder, I don't know how often ride alongs are done over there. So that's something we used to do here. Even if you didn't ride with a carrier or, whatever, you might go to different sites as the safe, just do quick inspections. A delivery is going, hey, let's see if we can maybe follow for a few, see where they are, hit them different sites. And that's one of those. I wonder how routinely is that done to basically expect the unexpected, meaning every situation you go to is unexpected. So how can you expect those potentially unexpected hazards that are there?
So
Because that's what that seems like, honestly, to a large extent.
so for our British listeners, just clarify what you mean by ride along.
So a ride along here, you might have physically someone, a safety, or if there's someone else, maybe it's not a straight safety manager, but someone else who has been designated in that role that can manage, do inspections or audits or whatever. They would ride along with the carrier in this case. Maybe, how do you do today? Let's just hit some of the sites with you. I'll go out with you, watch you as you do the job. So it's basically a extended assessment and just being with them, seeing how they operate. A lot of times you might ride with that person, but even if you don't, I might be in my own vehicle speaking with them, knowing where they're going. So I could go to be with you and go hit Jules's sites, and I could go to where Jenny is, or whatever. So that's what a ride along. It's literally riding with them and going to their job sites.
Can you do me a favor? Can you just say that word one more time? Because I really like the way you say it, which is vehicle.
Which one?
Vehicle.
Oh, vehicle?
Vehicle. Yeah.
Vehicle.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
gotta stretch the vehicle.
Okay.
Automobile.
Cool. Just to build on that same point of ride-alongs, because I think it's a really interesting one as well, is again, as safety people, it's that opportunity to coach, isn't it? And we've talked about coaching before, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. Is actually we can train people till we're blue in the face, but actually sometimes it's that on the job sort of discussion that is really valuable in terms of just getting people to think. Yeah. So a great example with this incident that I've witnessed is just getting people to think in terms of, right, okay, might seem really innocuous, but what's the danger of just dragging the pallet truck out, sorry, and just pushing it behind yourself? Yeah. Um, it's not just a trip hazard for you; it's a trip hazard for people walking down that thoroughfare as well. And again, it can seem really picky, can't it? And that's the problem with the sort of detractors of safety is they pick on things like that and say, "Oh, you're just being fussy." But this shows why you need to sort of focus on those small things, those marginal gains again that we've talked about previously. So I thought it was a really interesting. Again, I wish I hadn't had to sit and watch it for the guy's sake because it was just a really unpleasant thing. I mean, it's unpleasant to watch, but for this guy to break your arm is just really a pretty horrible thing. But again, like everything in life, it's an opportunity to learn, isn't it? To sit and ponder, right? What can we do differently? And I think one of the biggest sort of light bulb moments for me was that later conversation, which said actually there's a value to going back and looking at those historical incidents just to keep reminding ourselves why do we go and put the pallet truck back on the tail lift before we get the good sign for? Oh, we do it because that thing happened. Yeah. And that's when actually people stick to the good process and keep focused on the good approach. Yeah.
Yep. And that's why, likewise, that idea, the idea of annual reviews of your JHAs, annual reviews of your SOPs, of the process, your standard operating procedures, whatever it is, because when you do that, if you're looking at your past incidents, when you're reviewing those, when you make it a focus that you have to do annually, it keeps it fresh and it keeps everyone aware of why are we doing this, especially, and even if it's not organizationally wide, if at least if they can do it to what they pertain to. So drivers, what hazards have you experienced, what incidents have you experienced, what's the process, that's when you start seeing that's part of that continuous improvement, continually learning, because crap happens, and that's you're only a second away. I like what you said because I think that's right. We may I don't want to say detractors from safety, but why are you doing something that way? Well, because it's a safe way, and you might get laughed at or whatever. But ultimately, if it is the safest way while you're still being productive, while you're still able to provide a quality job or whatever, there is a reason. I mean, it could be me at home when I trim shrubs outside. Oh, I need to go get my glasses right quick. Well, I'm not wearing my glasses. Well, there's a reason. I got a thorn in my eye. I mean, whatever it is, it can be however minor, however serious. I mean, there's adverse effects that occur, and just to always make the assumption that it's not going to happen to us, unfortunately, it's probably going to happen, or it could happen at some point, just as much to you as me.
And there is an absolute rule of thumb, isn't there, Langdon, that safety people are the worst in the world when they're at home doing odd jobs for not doing things properly and ending up
Truly,
injuring themselves. So,
yes.
so that's an even better reason for going and getting the safety gear. I do think you've just come up with a great title for the pod, though, which is "Crap Happens," or maybe "How do we stop crap happening?" That might be a better one. And I think sort of wrapping up, I think another great point you've picked up on there, and again is really important to think about is how often do you go back and and check those SOPs, those JHAs, those risk assessments. Again, just through experience of a lot of organisations, if you haven't got your systems right, it's really challenging sometimes to make sure that those simple reviews happen that remind us, why do we do this the way that we do it? And just, again, not just reviewing the risk assessment as a supervisor or a manager, but reviewing it with the people who are actually going to use the risk assessment on a daily basis. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. So a slightly different pod there, but we just thought actually it was really worth just taking this real situation and sort of just talking through some of the possible learning points that we could all take from it. And so my thoughts go out to the guy. Hope he's recovering well, and and let's try and avoid those things happening in our organisations. So good to see you, Langdon. Do you want to? I mean, I think it's the perfect time for you to say your line.
This truly is a perfect scenario, everyone, when you're out there, when you're on your job, when you're in life. We'll talk to you next time, but watch each other's back out there. Stay safe.
Absolutely. Thanks, Langdon.
Thanks, Jules. Hey, everyone. Really appreciate you tuning into this episode of Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. Please follow and subscribe to wherever you stream your favorite podcast, or visit us at evotix.com.
And if you want to see how follically challenged we really are, come and check us out on YouTube. If you've got value from the podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts, and in the review section of this podcast, if you could leave us a review or a rating, that would be great.
And as always, everyone, while you're going about your days and about your normal lives, stay safe out there and watch each other's back.